So guys, as we promised, here we are in Value of Time. It is the official partner for all of Richard Mille's pre-owned watches here. As it's actually a partnership with Richard Mille and the incredible Tan family here in Singapore. And we love these guys, and we love them in particular because they have arrayed some of the most awesome watches in front of us. Now, let's do a little bit of a Richard Mille tutorial. The first thing is, let's get the name right.
Okay.
Because Constant, I see this on social media all the time, and I see people saying Richard Mille.
Yeah, Richard Mille, you know, all
Mille,
this stuff, yeah.
exactly. And then I even see guys referring to it by its first name. You know, it's like, that's my Richard watch. Okay, guys, let's do it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Richard Mille. The objective today is to talk about different eras of Richard Mille watches. And one of the very interesting eras for me is kind of the classic era of Richard Mille from 2001 when the watch brand was born, all the way to, let's say, about 2010, which coincides with the creation of the first Rafael Nadal watch, the RM27, okay? But let's talk about those early days. So everyone knows the story of how Richard wanted to create a watch that was complete rupture from the past. That was, in terms of quality, finishing, execution, respectful of all the Swiss traditional watchmaking, haute de gamme, high watchmaking, but he wanted to create something completely new. And its references would be like a lightning rod for contemporary culture. We're gonna invoke F1, performance, and later on, lightweight, which was never something in watches before, which is really cool. Okay?
That's true, yeah. In the early 2000s, nothing like it.
Exactly. So the first watch that he created was in 2001, and it was the Richard Mille 001, right? Now, there were only 17 pieces of that watch that were ever created, and they're the only ones in Richard Mille's history that have a brass base plate.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yes, and that watch, when you look at it, it's very similar to the RM2, which we'll see here, because it has the power reserve indicator and the dynamograph or torque indicator on the top, which shows you not just the amount of power that you have in the barrel, but the quality of torque in the mainspring, right? Which is like, Richard always wanted to have like these performance indicators like a race car. But it does not have the gear selector, which only appears in the RM002, like this watch right here.
That's interesting.
And that watch to me is like really representative of this iconography that Richard created. It is his tonneau shape. But then you look at the sides of the watch, and it's got these kind of fluted architectural elements. It's got these exposed screws, which are screws that are his own design, right? And now you have the introduction of an all new material for the base plate. We have titanium for the base plate.
Wow.
Right? But it's PVD coated to be this black color, which was a huge pain in the ass. Right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wow. So it's PVD treated titanium, and any touch of the screwdriver on this base plate meant that a base plate would be destroyed, and the rejection rate was enormous.
Oh my God.
So actually what was really interesting was that after the RMO2, in titanium, you would eventually have a transition to carbon fiber base plates.
Okay.
The first watch that incorporated carbon fiber into its base plate for all the series was the RMO6. And the reason why was carbon fiber was even more shock resistant than titanium. But in addition to that, you didn't have the challenge of having to touch, once you touch a screwdriver on a PVD coated titanium base plate, you've essentially scratched it, right? So actually, watches with the titanium base plates are extremely collectible from my perspective as well. And that's the watch that we have here. So here we have the Richard Mille RM02, and now we're going to try it on our wrist. So I'm going to remove my watch, and I'm going to show you. Like, you have to understand the context. I mean, this was just mind-blowing. There you go.
Yeah. Wow.
It's so cool, right?
Yeah, it's very nice. I like the old Richard Milles have the smaller case as well.
Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing now. So, you know, so now we're now 21 years after this watch is made, right? So I remember, this is how old I was. When they first came out, everyone was asking, but Richard Milles are such incredible watches. From a technical perspective, they're so cool. But how are they going to age? How will people perceive them in 20 years? And hey, guys, it's now 20 years later. And I can say that in some ways, they're even cooler today.
They're even more relevant today.
Yes, exactly. In fact, you can say that the entire era of modern watchmaking, the fixation we've had with like lightweight materials, with alternative materials like titanium, ceramic, carbon fiber, all of this can be attributed to Richard Mille and his pioneering work in watchmaking. And this watch is kind of like the very first bold step forward. So RMO2 with a titanium base plate, this one's in white gold, available at the Value of Time, and with this beautiful white rubber strap and this very special titanium deployant.
Yeah, the leaf sprung buckle, which is really, I mean, it is a revolutionary thing as well. You know, Richard Mille is one of the first one that actually ever do that.
Exactly. And you know, when you guys take a close look at this watch, because we'll shoot it in close up for you as well, you'll see that all these elements are suspended onto the base plate. So you've got the barrel kind of like floating with these like 4 arms that also act as suspension bridges. You've got this incredible, you know, tourbillon bridge that acts like a suspension tower, like you would see in the strut of an F1 car. And then the back of the watch is really incredible too. So you've got a combination of titanium and arcop as well, which is an extra rigid material, and that is finished to such an incredible level in terms of his respect of like high watchmaking, but thoroughly modern. In the context of 2001, when you saw this, it was like an alien landing.
It's mind-blowing, really.
So let's go from that to one of my favorite watches, and I think one of the all-time most beautiful Richard Milles. So we're going to jump forward to 2003 to the introduction of the RM04 split-second chronograph. So Constant, what do you think of that watch?
Wow, dope. Looks nice. I mean, everything is like monochromatic.
So this is the thing also about Richard Mille. Like a lot of people talk to him, talk about how he introduced materials to it, but he also introduced an all-new aesthetic, right? Before Richard Mille, what was a luxury watch? It was in gold. It was in platinum.
Leather straps.
Leather straps. It had maybe diamonds in it to show that it was expensive, but Richard wanted to go the opposite direction. He was super influenced by the world of performance, and this is really an aesthetic that he introduced. You have a watch that's almost pure in its monochromism. Right?
Super
and
cool.
then you have this beautiful sandblasted titanium finish, right? And everything on here is not to show off, but it's purely for performance, right? So you've got titanium and then combined with a carbon fiber base plate, which is incredibly light, which is really rigid, but incredibly shock absorbent as well. Now, the split-second chronograph is, a lot of people say it's the hardest complication to achieve after the minute repeater. The other thing about the Rattrapant is it was usually a very traditional complication. So when you look at it, you think of a Patek, or you think of a Vacheron, or you think, and so you look at it and it's very classic in its execution. Oftentimes it's a Geneva seal watch, for example. Now look at that movement, right?
Wow.
That is, to me, one of the most beautiful movements of all time. And you can see, and this is a great example of how Richard respects tradition but is modern at the same time. So what you see is you see two column wheels as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's a column wheel watch, not just for the chronograph, but also for the Rattrapant mechanism. But then every single part of that watch, whether it's the coupling lever for the chronograph, whether it's the two pincers that are used for the split-second brake, it looks like a robotic like arm.
Wow,
You
it
know,
looks like a
cyborg.
It's like a city down there, man.
And there's so much complexity to that as well. Now let's put this on the wrist and you tell me what you think.
I like this watch. I think, no, after the explanation, I think I like this better than maybe the RM02. I'm sorry, O2. But you know, this is cool, man. This is like a real proper functional a watch that's made for technicality and hyper performance.
You know what's amazing about this watch also is if you look at it, you see so much going on from even the front of the watch as well. You know, you see the barrel; it's suspended by these forearms as well. You see all of the mechanism from the front of the watch. Now, what's really interesting was then people start to ask, Richard, would it be possible for you to create a chronograph with this kind of beauty, but at a slightly more accessible price point? And his response was absolutely, and in 2007, he created one of the watches that became the most popular models for Richard Mille of all time. It's still in existence today, and it is the RM11. Right?
Wow.
So we have two examples of that watch right here.
So
let's take a look at that one first.
So this is the RM1102, right?
Correct.
So you can tell me more about this, Wei. I don't know much about RM, that's why I'm learning.
Yeah, I think that's a nice thing about having us together. Is, as you can see, I'm a Richard Mille nerd,
yes,
and you're a vintage watch nerd. That we're trying to kind of get interested in Richard Milles as well.
Yeah.
But I would say what's really interesting about these watches, and I think that that's important. Please take off your bubble back.
Sure, of course.
And I think in order to truly understand Richard Mille watches, you need to put one on your wrist. So I would suggest, since you like the RM04 so much, just put that on your wrist.
Sure.
Right.
Wow. I really like the leaf sprung buckle. I think it's really quite, it feels good.
But look at the side of the case as well. You'll see that it's incredibly ergonomic from that perspective as well. And that's one of the things that Richard used to always say is like when people would say, hey Richard, I really like your watch, I'm thinking about buying one, he would always say, be careful because it becomes a bit of an addiction. And the thing is, when you start to put your Richard Mille on, you start to wear it a little bit more than your other watches, and sometimes a lot more than your other watches, because it would be one thing if you made a fantastically complex and incredibly innovative watch, but it would be destroyed if it wasn't comfortable. And we know some watches that are like that. But that watch is incredibly comfortable, and that's one of the things I've always loved about Richard. He's a guy who, well, he's a vintage car pilot. He loves driving, and he loves things that feel so great on the wrist. And it's because of that that eventually you would have race car drivers like Felipe Massa wearing the watch on the wrist during the F1 race, right? And eventually the ultimate testament to that would be in 2010 when Rafael Nadal would wear a Richard Mille's wrist, and he would go on to win multiple Grand Slams with that on. Okay, for Richard Mille, he decided that he would take a lot of the visual identity of that watch and create something, one of his more accessibly priced watches, because he wanted more people to be able to wear Richard Mille watches. As a result, the 11 was born. So the 11 has a very interesting construction. It has a module that's created in collaboration with a partner, Dubois de Praz, and then has a base movement that is created in collaboration with Vaucher.
Yeah.
So as you can see, what's really interesting is that this movement also takes all of that beautiful modernism that you see in the RMO4 and applies it to an automatic movement that's driving a chronograph as well.
Oh yeah, this is the Richard Mille that I know.
Right?
Yeah.
And this, okay, it's a pretty substantial watch. It's titanium, so it's actually extremely wearable. But like, you put it on your wrist, and this watch really defined that like era of like Richard Mille. You look at it on your wrist, and people know exactly what you're wearing. So Constant's going to turn this watch towards the camera, and I'm going to turn this watch towards the camera, and you could immediately understand what it is that makes a watch a Richard Mille. It's got incredible presence on the wrist. It's fully modern, incredibly technical, really transparent, and embraces modern materials as well. And if you like modern materials, I want to show you another version of the 11. Constant, if you can grab that watch for me as well.
Yeah, this is a beautiful one. This is a Army 11 Asia edition. So this is in brown ceramic and rose gold. So really, really beautiful watch. You know?
And I think that's one of the wonderful things about the RM11. It's been made in many different versions over the time. It's a watch that has really showcased Richard Mille's like use of different materials and the modularity of those materials. So you could have, for example, a rose gold case band, which is a more traditional material, but then a super contemporary material. And also most of these watches you can see are on rubber straps or even some Velcro straps like my watch as well. So let's go from there to my watch. So we've talked about the Richard Mille RMO2, which was created in 2001. We've talked about the Richard Mille RMO4, which was created in 2003. We've talked about two versions of the RM11, which was originally created in 2007. Now we're going to go to 2009. We're going to talk about my watch, the RM21. So the RM21 I like to think of as kind of a transitional watch, maybe one of the last more traditional watches, but with some inkling of what we would see in the future. So the first thing that I love about this watch is it's got an orthorhombic base plate. Orthorhombic just means 8-sided.
Okay.
Right? So then you have a honeycomb structure here made in the same material that's inside the fuselage of airplane wings, for example. So you see like a lot of times the aerofoils in F1 cars or even in plane wings is made of carbon. But you need a stiffener inside it, and that's the material that you have in there. And the honeycomb structure is simultaneously one of the strongest structures on Earth and actually appears in nature, like in beehives and so on like that, but also one of the lightest as well, right? So Richard wanted to create a base plate for this watch that was created of this orthorhombic structure in titanium aluminide. And then on top of that, you've got these bridges for both the barrel and for the tourbillon that are shaped like turbines in titanium as well, which I think is really cool, right? So also, and I kind of really have a penchant for Richard Mille's executed in titanium, titanium case as well, and feather light on the wrist. It's also got the signature 3 identifiers for me of classic Richard Mille watches. One is the power reserve indicator, the second is the torque indicator, and the third is the gear selector, right? And the gear selector here is, all, as you have in the RMO2 through the pusher here, just take note that the RMO4 you actually have to pull the crown to manipulate the gear selector because you can't add an additional pusher here because you already have a specific chronograph going on, right? So I would say that this watch is kind of to the tail end of what I like to call the classic period of Richard Mille. And now I want to show you a watch that I think really represents the contemporary era of Richard Mille. And now we're going to talk about 2703.
Yes.
So there you have it, right? And this is a watch that was made in collaboration with the incredible Rafael Nadal. So this watch is even more remarkable in some ways because it's not rated to 5,000 Gs. It's rated to 10,000 Gs. Right? I don't even know what the equivalent of 10,000 Gs in terms of shock is.
What's that? I don't know. I better go back and do some research on what 10,000 Gs.
But let's just say it's a lot, right? So what you have here also is exactly the structure that we were talking about. This mid part of the watch has the bridges of the watch, which are skeletonized in carbon, NTPT, integrated into the mid case. So it's all one part. And then on top of that, you have this beautiful V-shaped titanium structure, which is retaining the gear train of this tourbillon as well, right? And it was interesting too, because I think it was the Nadal watch that first introduced us to the Velcro strap. Which then everyone started to change their watches to Velcro straps as well because they're awesome, right? So I want you to put that watch on your wrist. I'm going to take your RMO4 off of yours.
I love this. Actually, I like the RM on my wrist.
It feels great, right?
This is cool.
Well, it's a great everyday strap in Singapore because no one's going to rob you. And we'll talk about that later. So, okay, now I'm going to turn the watch to the camera, right? So as you can see, this is a watch that was created in 2003, and that was a watch that was created in 2017. You can see the genetic lineage between these two watches in terms of the case shape, in terms of the construction, in terms of the visible screws, in terms of the focus and performance, shock resistance, ergonomics, and lightness. But this is kind of a watch that's now representative of the modern era of Richard Mille's. Maybe more colorful, more playing with colors, more playing with unique constructions. And this would continue until to this day, right? But what I really like to think about is that every brand has its roots, and the roots of Richard Mille are in these watches here. So you have, as I said before, the RMO2, the RMO4 that's now on my wrist, the RM11 here, the RM21 from 2009.
And of course the last RM27 Rafael Nadal edition.
So back in 2003 when this watch was launched, it was just over 200,000 Singapore dollars, and today it's the market price is over 350,000. You know, and this is incidentally not a master class in investment, right? But how do you think that Richard Mille will age also in terms of their investment value? And I think that there's a pretty strong statement of the investment value of these watches right here, right? So anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I really would love to thank Value of Time in particular for allowing us to play with these, you know, early era Richard Mille watches and pointing out to you some of the more iconic models from that era as well. Right. So the last thing that we would like to talk about is we also love being in Singapore when you are wearing a Richard Mille watch, because Singapore is an incredibly safe place. And I think of two places off the top of my mind, I think is Dubai and Singapore are probably the safest in terms of being able to wear Richard Mille watches. Unfortunately, probably Europe is not a great place to wear Richard Mille nowadays.
Unfortunately, right now,
you know, but the question is constantly, how safe is Singapore really?
Safe enough, I guess, to wear a Richard Mille everywhere, but depends how much boundaries you want to break, but I think it's pretty safe. Okay, a question for you. Do you think someone could take a Richard Mille watch and leave it on a street bench, unattended, and anyone would take it? I mean, as a Singaporean, it's highly, I don't really recommend it, but you know, it is what it is. If you want to try it.
Let's test the safety of Singapore. Let's go take my watch and put it on a bench, leave it unaccompanied, and go get an ice cream. Come with us. Wei and Constant back here on scenic Orchard Road, probably most famous road here in Singapore. Now, we have always been told that Singapore is one of the safest, if not the safest country in the world, right? So we want to see that is this really a place where not only can you wear your Richard Mille in peace and tranquility, but could you actually take it off, leave it in a public area in the street, go for a snack, come back in a few minutes, and it will still be there.
Oh man, wow. We'll see right now. So what I gotta do?
Well, first thing is I'm gonna put down a soft surface for my watch.
Okay.
You may have watched our video on the 5 things never to do with your friend's watch, and one of them is never put it on a hard surface. Next, I'm gonna take my Richard Mille watch. I think you better kind of come in closer so you can see that
this is a real Richard Mille.
It's not a stunt watch, it's a real Richard Mille. It's my personal RM21. And now I'm gonna put it just here. Okay? And now, Constant, let's go for a snack.
Right, let's go.
All right. Oh, it's a coffee place.
Oh, it's a coffee place.
You want a coffee?
Oh yeah, man.
Let's have a coffee.
What is this? Need to sign out then, can I?
So this is the problem, is that we're so technologically advanced here in Singapore that you can't even pay with normal money. You have to scan and pay, and you have to sign up as a member first.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. No worries.
Well, maybe we'll go look for an ice cream. Wow, this actually is pretty far. We could be screwed. When I say we, I mean me.
Uncle, chocolate chip.
There you go. Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's go.
Ice cream is good.
Yeah.
Now let's go back and see if the watch is still there.
Let's see. Can we end this shoot with a good shoot or a disaster shoot?
So you guys, you can look over there. You can see that there's people walking by. We haven't like set up any security or anything like that.
Shit. Oh no. All right.
Also, I'm going to ask you to hold my ice cream for a second.
Sure.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, thanks to the safety of Singapore, my RM21, it's still here, it's intact. No one has taken it. So,
thank God, man.
So, Singapore, you're a wonderful city, you're a wonderful country. Thank you for your prevailing safety. And RM21, I'm so glad you're still here. And you see, as Constance says, there's now a peaceful and happy ending. Not happy ending in the massage type, but happy ending for this video. Dude, thank you very much. Cheers!
And of course,
Cheers! Cheers!
Right.